So here I think I'm going to use formula number 2, which is 2 parts rubbing alcohol and 1 part vinegar. And I'm just going to use this hunter green paint. Now it may not look like the right color for the leaves because I tend to, that's kind of more of a subdued green, but we're going to go ahead and try it anyway. And we're just doing it on a small little, this is what I mean when I'm just doing a little bit or a one-off. Taking a little bit of paint and putting it on something. I'm going to open this up, and then I'm going to pour a little bit in this well here. And then, now that was formula 2, and then I'm just going to slowly add a little bit in. And here's where you have to kind of play around to see. It depends on how opaque you want it. The more you add the medium, the more transparent, or I guess you'd say translucent or tinting it becomes. And this is kind of an experiment. I'm going to do it on here and see. And I always use absorbent paper when I color enhance. So let's try a little bit. Because I want the paint, I always want to work the paint off. And this seems to be working really good. And the other thing you want is for it to dry fast. Let me see if, and then I work it a little bit as it's drying. If you're going to use it on something that you can see both sides, for example, sandwiching between laminate or between acetate or something, you're going to want to also paint the back. But I usually let one side dry first. Not always, but sometimes. We'll go ahead and do the back. Okay. And then smooth out the front again. Okay. Now, although I use absorbent paper when I'm painting, you want to use non-absorbent paper, wax paper, parchment paper, or something to put these down on while they dry. For example, this is from Labels, and Labels, nothing sticks to this. And so I'm just going to set it on here to dry. And usually what I'll do is I will crinkle it so that the botanical excuse me, isn't making contact with the whole piece of paper, only certain parts are, which again helps it to keep it from sticking. And so I will put the botanical on here. Got a piece of debris on there. See, there's a piece of brown debris on there. I will bring this up to the camera in a minute and do a closer look if you're wondering. So, let me see if I can bring this up. Now that's kind of shiny. So that fabric paint's got a lot of shine to it. But it worked okay. While I have the paint out, let's do another one. I always have a toothpick at the ready. So figure out which side's the front. And then I always work from the inside out. And then I just work it off because all I'm wanting is a tint. And you want to get it off this paper fast so it doesn't stick to the paper. And if you have a problem and it's sticking, just kind of see how you work the paper, and then it lifts it up enough that you can get your tweezers down under there. Let me bring this up. See? Now, that's been, that's okay. You see how it's already dried and didn't even color that. How quickly that's drying. So that's one that's been painted, and that's one that hasn't. The point of color enhancing is that as these fade over time, I'm not even sure if that's the front. That's the front. As these fade over time, and this gets a little bit more faded, the tinting from the color enhancing will still be there, and so it will maintain a little bit. It will maintain some of its coloration and vibrancy for a longer period of time. That's the main reason why. And different botanicals behave differently. Now this one is drying a lot faster than that fern. And then the texture also, it's some of the shine that was on the fern is getting a little bit more subdued as it's drying. And some botanicals will, because they're inherently shiny, show more shine when you do something than others. And the last thing I want to take a look at, I'll do the color enhance this one while we're at it. This one's really good because the leaf is very absorbent. It readily takes the paint. And get up under there right away. Lift it off. These tweezers, as you see me talk about in other videos, are bent, so that if I do need to pick the flower up, I can take the tips right here, and the whole, it's not really pressing down on the wet part. Then I usually go like that for a minute. Not a minute, a couple, seconds, and then I set it down on my paper. And then after I color enhance, I will, after these get dry, then I'll sandwich them between paper, and then I will put them in a magazine. If you've watched any of my pressing videos where you see what I put all my stuff in for pressing, I use those same things. So go back and look at those playlists for how I press flowers, because you want to maintain some, you don't need to put weight on them at this point. You can put maybe a book or something on them, but you just want to have them cure or stay flat with maybe a book on top until you're ready to use them. Because as they dry, and some things are different than others, they might twist and bend. Different things do different things, and we'll see that as we go forward, and I show you different kinds of botanicals and how they react being color enhanced. The only other thing that I brought out was to see if now, a good example of something that beads up is ivy. And they don't always bead up. I think it just depends on when you press them and what part of their life cycle they're in. But let's see if this one beads up so that I can use this as a demonstration. Yeah. Yeah, it's not too bad, but it's... well, let me bring it up closer to the camera and see if you can see what I'm talking about. I'm not sure if it's showing how it's beating up. Now this one's not doing it bad, but it's not as happy as I'd like it. So let's, while we're here, let's take our PPA matte formula number 3, put a little bit in the well of our thing, and let's just, I'm almost out of paint, but let's just paint this on and see if that makes a difference. I think it made it a little bit more smooth, but like I said, this one isn't beating up as bad as some of them. So we will, but yeah, that's better. That looks much better. Again, I don't know if you can tell on camera. But it's much better, much more smooth. And just because, if you're still here hanging out, I've got this out, I'm going to do this last ivy. I'm going to need a little bit more paint, and I'm going to use I think we'll try with the PPA gloss this time, see what happens. I'll put that in this well, just a couple drops, that was too much. Okay, that's probably thin enough, we'll see. Now, it looks like it's interesting. Huh. I'm going to bring this up real quick and show you, and then we're going to work it out. You see there's little bubbles on there. And the whiteness, the lightness, I think will mellow out as it dries, because this PPA gloss has a lot of white in it. I don't know if you can see, but it's like a lot of mediums that are white when they come out, but they dry clear. That's what I suspect is going on here. I'm going to work this a little bit because of the bubbling. There's some bubbles on there. And so sometimes if you've got these little, kind of like when you do resin, you get little air bubbles, you can work them out as it's drying. And so I'm going to take the excess off my brush, and I'm going to work it out. And my brush has started to dry with paint in it, so I need to find water. The paint was starting to dry in the brush and flaking. You know how acrylic gets flaky? Yeah, that was what was going on. So let's work that off. I don't think I'm as happy with the PPA gloss as I am with the matte Mod Podge. I'll have to do more experimenting with it. I don't know, there's just something about the matte Mod Podge for this color enhancing. Because I can see the brush strokes here. I don't like that at all. Let me use some matte. What is this? Oh, this was just a formula. That was formula number 2 I just dipped into. And now let's use some. Yeah, I guess I don't really like the PPA in there for that. It's good for a lot of things, but I don't think I like it for that. I know the PPA matte I've used like this, not where I've made it in the container, but where I've just put a little PPA matte and then a little of the formula, like Formula 2, and then added them all together. Now this is working out okay, but I had to add a little bit more Formula 2 and dilute it down with a little bit of PPA from these wells over here. And now I'll bring it up to the camera, and you can see how much better that looks now. Okay. There was one more thing that I wanted to do, and that is I wanted to play with some artistic expression. that brush in water, and I'm going to get a new, different brush. This is some Folk Art Metallic. And I am just going to dip my brush in there and wipe it off the side. And I'm going straight. And it might take more than one coat to lay down heavy enough. This is something where I just do it as an artistic expression. So I'll probably leave that to dry and do another coat. Lift it up and bring this up to the camera. See how pretty that is? So you could leave it like that with a little bit of the green showing through, or you could paint another coat or two and make it more opaque. Now that we got the brush dirty, let's go ahead and do part of this fern. Yeah, this isn't very opaque. There's metallics out there that are a lot more opaque than this. This is hardly doing anything to the fern. Not nearly. It's giving it a nice shimmer, but it's not covering it like something more opaque would. Let me bring this up to the camera. Just see how nice and shimmery that is. It's still very pretty. I like it. So it just depends on how opaque you want it to be. I like that a lot. So play around, have fun. Hopefully that helps. I'll let these dry. Some of these now that's a nice firm piece from here to here. I'll just probably snip that off there and go ahead and keep that. These are fine. And I'll go ahead and put them, like I said, I'll sandwich them in the book to keep them flat until we're ready to use them.